The twin suns of Archon burned high above, throwing sharp light over the sprawling slave market. The air was thick with heat, dust, and the cries of countless creatures. Merchants shouted in many tongues, their voices echoing between the crooked. Metal stalls, cages stood in long rows, filled with beings from different worlds, each chained and displayed like goods. Some shouted for freedom. Others wept quietly, but most sat in silence, their eyes broken. It was a market of chains, a place where life itself was nothing more than a bargain. Among the slaves stood a girl, small and fragile. Her body trembling in the open air, she wore nothing to cover herself. Abandoned without clothes, left bare for all to see. Her skin was pale under the burning suns. Her ribs showed from hunger, and her eyes were wide with fear. The crowd of aliens passed by her cage, some sneering, some laughing, some shaking their heads. She is too weak. One lizard-faced merchant said with a hiss, "Not worth a single credit." Another spat. They called her useless, broken, unwanted. Yet she stood there, clutching her arms around herself, trying to hide her shame. Every few moments, a buyer would stop and look, but only for a second. They always moved on, choosing stronger slaves. Warriors or workers, no one wanted the girl. Not for labor, not for pleasure, not for anything. Her captors grew impatient, banging the metal bars to make her stand straighter, but her legs shook, and she could barely keep balance. A voice from the crowd shouted, "Throw her to the scavengers, she is nothing." Laughter followed. Cruel and sharp, the girl closed her eyes, wishing she could disappear. All around her, sales continued. Chains rattled as creatures were dragged from their cages. Coins and credits clinked as buyers argued over prices. Merchants barked numbers, fighting to get the best deal. The smell of oil, sweat, and alien spices filled the air. But no matter how busy the market was, the girl was ignored. To them, she was invisible. A mistake left unsold. Her heart beat faster with every passing moment. She thought of the life she once had. Though the memories were faint, faces, voices, warmth, all blurred now, like a dream fading in the light. All she knew was fear, hunger, and the cold laughter of those who owned her. The sun burned her skin, the ground burned her feet, and still no one came. The merchant who held her cage cursed loudly. "This is the last one left," he snarled. He kicked the bars, making her stumble. Why won't anyone take her? She costs less than a meal, but the crowd only laughed again. She is worthless. A thick-bodied alien growled. "She will not survive a single day of work," said another. The merchant gritted his teeth, anger rising. Perhaps he would throw her away soon. Perhaps he would end it here. The girl heard every word, her heart sinking deeper. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Her body to dry from thirst. Her lips were cracked. Her throat burned. She whispered a sound, though no one heard. Her voice was too weak. Lost in the chaos of the market, she thought of escape, but there were guards everywhere, tall and armed. Even if she ran, where could she go? She was nothing but a broken shadow in a world that did not want her. Then the air shifted. The crowd's laughter slowed as someone new entered the square. A tall figure walked through the market, different from the others. The alien merchants looked up, their eyes narrowing. It was a human, rare in this part of the galaxy. Humans did not often come to the market of chains. They were known for strange ways, for being dangerous, for being unpredictable. The girl lifted her head weakly, her blurred vision focusing on the figure. She saw the scars on his face, the calmness in his eyes. He walked slowly, his gaze scanning the rows of cages. The merchants began whispering among themselves, "What is he doing here? Humans are trouble. Keep your distance." The human did not answer. He only walked, step by step. When his eyes fell on the girl's cage, he stopped. The merchant noticed. a greedy smile spreading across his face. Ah, human, looking for a slave? This one is cheap. Very cheap, he said quickly. The crowd laughed again, louder this time. Why would anyone take her? She is trash. She will die before sunrise. But the human did not laugh. He looked at the girl with quiet eyes, steady and unbroken. The girl felt her breath catch. For the first time in a long time, someone was not mocking her. Someone was not looking away. The market around her still roared with noise. But in that moment, she felt the silence of his gaze, and deep inside, a spark of hope flickered, a hope she did not dare to believe in. The sun slid lower in the sky, painting the market in harsh red light. Shadows stretched long across the dusty ground, and still the noise of trading filled the air. Cages were opened and slammed shut, chains clattered. Buyers dragged away their new slaves everywhere. Deals were struck, credits exchanged. Bargains shouted over the cries of the captives. The market was almost empty now. Most cages sold, most voices silenced by collars. Only a few remained unsold: the weak, the sick, the broken, and among them the girl still stood, trembling in her bare skin, the forgotten one. The merchant's patience was running out. He paced before her cage, his sharp teeth grinding together. He had sold everything else today: strong fighters, skilled workers, even exotic creatures that fetched high prices. But this girl, thin and weak, brought him nothing but shame. Buyers had glanced at her, sneered, and moved on. No matter how low he dropped the price, none would take her. His temper burned hot, and his pride stung deeper with every passing minute around the square. Laughter echoed, still trying to sell that one. A fat alien jeered. "She isn't worth the chain she wears," another shouted. A group of young aliens threw scraps of food at the cage, mocking her. The girl pressed herself against the corner, her arms wrapped tight around her chest. Each laugh felt like a knife, each insult like fire against her skin. Her heart beat fast, but her hope drained away. Drop by drop, the merchant banged the cage with a metal rod. "Stand up straight." He barked. The girl flinched, her legs shaking, but she forced herself upright. The crowd laughed harder, some clapping their hands, some pointing at her shame. The merchant growled, his eyes cold. "Useless thing, I should have left you for the scavengers," he hissed. The girl lowered her head, her breath trembling. She knew the truth of his words. She knew she was the last to be chosen, and maybe she never would be. The market began to thin, the noise slowly dying. Merchants packed their goods. Guards gathered chains. Buyers led away their new slaves. The air smelled of oil and blood. The ground littered with broken chains and torn cloth. The girl looked at the others leaving, her heart sinking deeper. They were gone now, bought, taken. Their fate sealed, and she remained alone in her cage, forgotten like dirt on the street. The merchant spat on the ground. "Worthless," he muttered. He turned as if to walk away. Perhaps to end her life quickly. Perhaps to abandon her in the dust. The girl closed her eyes, waiting for the strike. But then, footsteps echoed again, slow and steady. The crowd shifted, whispers spreading like fire. The human had returned. Still walking with that calm, steady pace, his eyes scanned the remaining cages, but always came back to hers. The merchant straightened quickly, greed flickering in his gaze. "Human, you came back. Good, very good," he said with false cheer. "Look at her, the last left, the cheapest of all. I will sell her for almost nothing." The crowd laughed louder than before. "You want that trash?" One alien mocked. "She cannot work, she cannot fight, she will die in your hands." But the human did not look at them. He only looked at the girl. His face gave away nothing. No pity, no disgust, only quiet study. The girl felt her breath. Catch again, her chest rising and falling with fear and wonder. Why was he looking at her? Why not turn away like the others? The merchant rattled the cage door. Do you want her or not? He snapped. She is eating my time. Give me the credits. Take her. She is nothing but weight. The human said nothing, but reached into his belt and pulled out a small pouch. He tossed it to the merchant, who caught it with greedy hands. The sound of credits clinking made his smile stretch wide. Yours, human, all yours, he said. Swinging the cage open, the girl gasped, her body stiff with fear. Was this another cruel trick? Another master who would laugh, then hurt her? The human stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. He reached into the cage, not with chains, not with a whip, but with a cloth. He draped it gently across her shoulders, covering her bare skin. The girl froze, her eyes wide, her heart thundering in her chest. No one had done this before. No one had given her warmth. The market went silent for a moment. Even the cruelest eyes watching in disbelief. The human spoke then, his voice low but steady. You're safe now. The girl's breath trembled, her fingers clutching the cloth around her. The words felt strange, like light cutting through endless dark. Safe, she repeated in her mind. Safe, she did not know if she could believe it. Not yet, but as the human led her out of the cage, shielding her from the stairs, something deep inside her stirred. Something she thought was dead. Hope, faint, but alive, and as they walked away from the market of chains, the crowd whispered behind them. Humans are strange. Humans are fools. Humans are dangerous. But the human did not turn back, and the girl, for the first time in years, dared to lift her head. She was no longer the last to be chosen. She was chosen. The path out of the market was long, narrow, and lined with broken stalls. The crowd still watched as the human walked away with the girl at his side. Whispers followed them like shadows. Mocking and curious at the same time. Why waste credits on her? One alien muttered. He must be mad, said another. The girl heard them all. Every cruel word, yet her eyes stayed on the ground. She walked unsteady. Her body weak from hunger and heat, her bare feet scraping against the rough stone. Only the cloth around her shoulders kept her from collapsing in shame. The human said nothing as they moved through the streets. His steps were slow but firm, his tall frame cutting through the crowd with ease. The merchants stared at him but did not dare approach. There was something about his presence, something quiet yet dangerous. The girl noticed it too, though she could not explain it. He was not like the others, not like the ones who mocked her. He was different. When they reached the edge of the market, the noise behind them faded. The streets grew quieter, lined with old buildings and flickering lights. The smell of smoke and rust filled the air. The girl stumbled once, her knees buckling, but before she fell, the human caught her arm. His grip was steady, strong, but not cruel. He lifted her gently back to her feet. Careful, he said softly, his voice calm. The girl's eyes widened. Unused to words spoken without anger, she wanted to speak, to ask why he helped her. But her throat was dry, her voice too weak. So she only nodded. Clutching the cloth tighter, they walked further until the noise of the city swallowed them. The girl kept stealing glances at him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face marked with scars of battles she could not imagine. His clothes were worn, practical, made for travel. A weapon hung at his side, strange and sharp, unlike any she had seen. His eyes, though, were the most striking. They held no mockery, no greed, only a steady calm. It unsettled her as much as it comforted her. Why had he chosen her when no one else would? What did he see that the others did not? The human finally stopped at a shaded corner. Where the walls hid them from view, he turned to her, his gaze steady. You are safe now, he repeated. The girl shook her head slowly. fear still heavy in her chest. "No one is safe," she whispered, her voice thin like broken glass. The human studied her for a moment, then crouched so his eyes met hers. "I am not like them," he said simply. The words struck her harder than any blow. Not like them. She did not know if she could believe him, but something in his eyes, something quiet and unshaken, made her want to. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of distant engines. The girl finally dared to ask, "Why me?" Her voice cracked. But the question was clear. The human leaned back slightly, his hand resting on his knee. He looked at her as if the answer was obvious. "Because no one else would," he said. The girl blinked, confused. "That is not a reason," she whispered. "It's the only one that matters." He replied, his voice calm. She stared at him, not understanding, but feeling something stir in her chest. A strange warmth, like a fire she thought had died long ago. He offered her a small bottle from his pack. "Drink," he said. She hesitated, suspicious. But her thirst was stronger. She lifted it to her lips, water spilling down her throat, cool and clean. Tears stung her eyes as she swallowed. She had forgotten what kindness tasted like. When she lowered the bottle, her hands shook. The human took it back without a word, sliding it into his pack again. "You will walk with me," he said. "Where?" she asked, her voice faint. "Somewhere better," he answered. She wanted to believe, but the galaxy had taught her only cruelty. Still, she followed, because what else could she do? As they walked, the city stretched before them. Strange lights flickered in the distance. Alien ships roared in the skies. The girl stumbled again, but the human slowed his pace, matching her weak steps. He never complained, never pulled her forward, only walked beside her. The more she watched him, the more questions filled her mind. Why did he not laugh at her? Why did he not hurt her? Why did he waste his credits? She had no answers. Only the sound of his steady footsteps to follow. Rumors traveled faster than footsteps. By the time they left the lower markets, whispers had already spread. "Did you see the human? He bought the worthless one." Humans are strange creatures. Some laughed, some shook their heads, some grew uneasy, for in this part of the galaxy, humans were rare, and a human who chose the weak over the strong was rarer still. The girl heard the whispers, but she stayed close to him. Her fear of the crowd slowly shifting into a different fear, the fear of losing the strange safety he carried with him. She did not trust him, not yet, but she trusted him more than the world around her. And as the suns dipped lower, painting the sky in fire, the girl knew her life had already changed. She was no longer the unwanted slave in a cage. She was the one the human stranger had chosen. Asterisk. The city lights glowed dim beneath the twin suns, their broken lamps casting long shadows across the narrow streets. The human led the girl through alleys that twisted like veins, away from the crowded markets, away from the noise. Every step felt unreal to her, her feet sore but her heart beating faster than ever. For the first time, she was walking outside the cage. No chains pulling her, no guards striking her back. Still, fear clung to her like a second skin, for freedom was a word she did not know. The human walked with steady silence, his tall frame like a shield against the curious stares. The girl stayed close, clutching the cloth around her shoulders, her thin arms hidden beneath its folds. She glanced at him often, but he never looked back. His gaze always forward, scanning the streets. To her, he was a mystery. A man who bought what no one else wanted, and she could not decide if he was her savior or her doom. They stopped at an old doorway, half-rusted, with strange symbols scratched into the metal. The human pressed a code into a small panel. The door slid open with a low hiss. Inside was a room, dim but safe, its walls lined with tools, packs, and strange devices. It was no palace, no rich man's home, but it was shelter. The girl hesitated. At the threshold, her body frozen by doubt, but the human's voice broke through. Calm and firm. "Come in." She stepped inside. Her bare feet touching cool metal. The door shut behind her, sealing the sounds of the city away. For the first time, silence filled her ears. Silence without laughter, without chains. Her body shook, not from cold, but from the strange weight. Of peace she had never known, the human set down his pack. Removing his weapon and placing it carefully on a stand, he moved with slow precision. As though every action mattered, the girl watched, too afraid to speak, too afraid to move. He turned to her at last, his eyes steady. "You need food?" he said. His voice calm. She blinked, confused, unsure if she had heard right. Food, the word felt strange on her tongue. He moved to a small unit on the wall, pressed a button, and soon a tray slid out, steaming with simple rations. The smell reached her nose, and her stomach clenched painfully. She had not eaten properly in days, maybe longer. Her body wanted to leap forward, but her mind held her back. Was this a test, another cruel trick? The human noticed her hesitation, his brow tightening. He placed the tray gently on a table, then stepped back, giving her space. "Eat," he said simply. Nothing more. She stared at the food, her mouth dry, her hands shaking. Slowly she stepped closer, each movement heavy with fear. When her fingers touched the tray, she waited for the strike, the laugh, the punishment. But none came. The human only watched in silence, so she lifted the first bite to her lips. Warmth filled her mouth, rich and heavy. Her body almost collapsed. With relief, tears stinging her eyes as she chewed, she ate quickly, too quickly, until she coughed. The human poured water into a cup and held it out to her. She froze again, staring at his hand, but then took it. Her lips pressing against the cool rim, the water slid down her throat and she gasped with relief. When she finished, she sat trembling, clutching the cup like it was treasure. The human cleared the tray, saying nothing, his movements calm, practiced. The silence between them grew heavy, broken only by her uneven breaths. Finally, she whispered, her voice raw. "Why? Why are you doing this?" The human paused, his hand resting on the table. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because you are alive," he answered. Her eyes widened, confusion clouding her thoughts. Alive to her meant suffering, meant being owned, but in his voice, the words sounded different, like it carried weight, like it carried meaning. She lowered her gaze, hugging herself tighter. She wanted to ask more, but fear locked her throat. The human seemed to understand, for he did not press her. Instead, he moved to a corner and pulled out a blanket. He placed it near a small bed along the wall. "Rest," he said. She stared at the blanket, unsure if she dared, but exhaustion pulled at her, her body too weak to resist. Slowly, she lay down, curling into herself. The blanket rough but warm. Her eyes fluttered, but her mind still raced. Could she trust him? Was this kindness real, or just another mask? The human sat across the room, cleaning his weapon, his eyes never leaving her. Not with suspicion, but with quiet watchfulness. She felt his gaze even as sleep tugged at her. Strange comfort filled her chest, a feeling she had not known in years. As her breathing slowed, she whispered one last question. Half asleep, "What is your name?" The human looked up, the faintest flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Elias," he said. The name echoed in her fading mind, strange yet steady. And with that, she drifted into sleep, the first peaceful sleep she had ever known. Outside, the city roared on, filled with cruelty and greed. But inside the small room, for the first time, she was taken in, not as property, not as trash, but as something more. And though she could not yet understand why, the spark of hope in her heart grew a little brighter. The first light of dawn crept into the city, spilling across metal rooftops and broken streets. The girl woke slowly, her body stiff but wrapped in the warmth of the blanket. For a moment, she thought it was a dream, that the market and the chains were still waiting, but the silence of the room reminded her. It was real. She was here, and she had not been hurt. Her eyes turned to the corner, where Elias sat, awake and watchful, his weapon resting across his knees. He had not slept, not once, through the night. When their eyes met, she quickly looked down, still unsure how to face him, yet a strange calm lingered in her chest. A calm she had never known in all her years of captivity. Elias stood and moved to the table, setting down a piece of bread and a small bottle of water. "Eat," he said simply, his voice steady. The girl obeyed, her hunger stronger than her. Doubt. Every bite felt like a gift, every swallow like life returning to her bones. When she finished, Elias packed his gear with swift, practiced movements. He slid the weapon back into its holster and checked the straps of his pack. The girl watched, her curiosity growing. At last she asked, her voice soft. "Where are we going?" Elias paused, his eyes flicking toward the door. "Away from here," he replied. Her heart beat faster, the words sharp with both fear and hope. Away meant freedom, but it also meant danger. The city outside was waking, the sound of engines and shouts filling the air again. Elias opened the door, gesturing for her to follow. Her feet hesitated at the threshold, but when she saw his calm figure, she stepped out. The streets were already crowded with merchants and guards. Eyes turned toward them, curious and suspicious. The girl pulled the cloth tighter around her shoulders, wishing she could vanish, but Elias walked with steady steps, his pace unhurried, his head high. The crowd parted without him asking, for there was something in his presence that made others step aside as they moved deeper into the city. Whispers followed them. "Look, the human still has her. He took the useless one. Fool, he will regret it." The girl kept her gaze low, shame burning in her chest. But Elias never slowed, never flinched. His calm was like a shield, wrapping around her as much as his cloth had. They reached a checkpoint guarded by armored aliens, their weapons gleaming under the suns. The guards eyed Elias sharply. Then their gazes fell on the girl. One sneered, stepping forward. "No slaves leave this district without a mark," he hissed. "She is no slave," Elias answered, his voice deep and calm. The guard laughed, shaking his head. "She came from the market. I can smell it on her. She belongs to the chains." The girl's stomach twisted, fear clawing at her chest, but Elias stepped closer, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. "Not anymore," he said. His tone carried no threat, yet the silence that followed was heavy with danger. The guards shifted uneasily, sensing the quiet strength in his stance. Finally, one waved them through with a snarl. "Go then, human, but do not bring her back." The girl exhaled shakily as they passed, her legs trembling. Elias did not look back, his eyes fixed forward. "You spoke for me," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "I told the truth," he replied simply. The words struck her harder than the guard's insults. No one had ever spoken truth on her behalf before. As the city walls came into view, the noise of the market faded. Behind them, ships soared overhead, engines screaming, their shadows cutting across the ground. The girl stared in awe, her heart caught between fear and wonder. This was the galaxy she had never seen, wide and alive beyond her cage. Elias guided her toward the outer gates, moving with quiet confidence. But the girl noticed his eyes scanning every corner, every rooftop. Danger was not behind them alone. Danger was everywhere, at the gate. A group of merchants argued loudly, blocking the way. Elias slowed. Placing himself between the crowd and the girl, she clutched his sleeve, her breath quickening. One of the merchants noticed her and sneered, "Still dragging her with you? Human, why waste the weight?" The others laughed, their voices sharp and cruel, but Elias did not answer, his silence heavier than their words. The merchant soon looked away, unsettled by the calm steel in his eyes. Beyond the gate stretched the open road. Winding into rocky hills under the twin suns, the girl froze, staring at the wide horizon. For so long her world had been nothing but bars and shadows. Now the sky stretched endless, the air sharp and free. Her chest tightened, overwhelmed by the sight. She turned to Elias, her voice trembling. "Where does this road go?" "To my ship," he replied, his tone quiet but certain. The word ship sent a shiver down her spine. A way out, a path into the stars, something inside her, long buried, began to stir again. They walked together, the noise of the city fading behind them. The girl stumbled often, her legs weak. But Elias matched her pace, never rushing. Every time she faltered, his hand steadied her. Never harsh, never impatient. She could not understand him. This human who treated her as if she mattered, but with every step, the cage of her past grew smaller in her mind. And the vast unknown of tomorrow grew larger before her as they reached the first hill. The girl looked back one last time. The market of chains lay hidden behind smoke and walls. A place of cruelty, of laughter that cut like knives. She turned away. Clutching the cloth around her shoulders tighter, her voice shook as she whispered, almost to herself. "I will not go back," Elias heard, though he gave no reply. Instead, he placed a steady hand on her shoulder, guiding her forward, and together they began the journey out. The road stretched long across the rocky hills, the twin suns rising higher in the sky. The heat pressed down like a heavy hand. And the girl's steps grew slower. Her breath came shallow, her body weak, yet still she followed Elias every time. Her knees threatened to give, his steady hand kept her upright. He never scolded, never hurried her, only adjusted his pace to match her failing strength. At last they stopped beneath the shadow of a jagged cliff. Elias set down his pack and scanned the horizon, his eyes sharp and searching. The girl sank to the ground, clutching the cloth around her shoulders. Her chest heaved, her lips dry. But her eyes remained fixed on him. She could not understand him. This human who gave her water, who shielded her, who spoke for her, and yet the thought kept circling in her mind. He must have a reason. No one does kindness for nothing. He handed her a small piece of dried fruit. "Eat," he said simply. She obeyed, chewing slowly, her body grateful, even if her mind still doubted. When she finished, she whispered, "Why me?" Elias looked at her, his scarred face calm, his eyes steady. "You will see," he said. And nothing more. The silence stretched, filled with the dry whistle of the wind. The girl lowered her gaze, frustrated. She wanted to believe he saw something in her, but what could there be? She was weak, unwanted, the last to be chosen. Her hands trembled, clutching the cloth tighter. No skill, no worth, nothing to offer. And yet, as she sat in the shadow of the cliff, something stirred in her memory. Far away, beyond the heat and the chains, she remembered nights long ago, a voice teaching her to read old star maps, hands guiding hers as she traced the shapes of constellations, a past that felt like smoke now, but the memory still lingered. She shook her head, chasing it away, for memories only brought pain. As Elias prepared his pack again, he pulled out a small device. It flickered with strange lights, a map of shifting coordinates. He frowned, adjusting the screen, his brows drawn tight. The girl watched in silence, curiosity tugging at her. She had seen devices like this once before. Long ago, her lips parted before she realized. That path is wrong. Elias turned sharply, his eyes locking on her. The girl froze, fear flooding her chest. Had she spoken out of turn? How would he strike her now? But Elias did not raise his hand. He held the device out instead. "What did you say?" His voice was calm but heavy. Her heart pounded, but the words tumbled out. "The route, it bends too far east. The canyon there will block your way." She pointed weakly, her finger tracing the lines of the glowing map. "If you cut north here, through the pass, you will save 2 days." Elias studied her, his eyes narrowing not with anger but with thought. "You know these maps?" he asked. She nodded slowly, her breath shaking. "Long ago. Someone taught me." For a moment, silence pressed between them, heavy and sharp. Then Elias gave a single nod, his voice low. "Good." The word struck her like lightning, simple yet powerful. Good. No one had ever spoken that word to her. Not for something she had done. Her chest tightened, her throat burning with unfamiliar heat. She lowered her eyes quickly, hiding the tears that threatened. They rose again, walking the corrected path. The girl felt strange, as though the ground beneath her was different now. For the first time, she had offered something, not just weakness, not just shame. Something useful, something real. Elias did not praise her again, but he walked with the same calm stride. Yet she felt his gaze flick to her once, almost like quiet approval. The day stretched long. The suns burning their backs, shadows grew sharp across the rocks, and the air shimmered with heat. They stopped again when the horizon turned red with evening. Elias built a small fire from scraps of dry wood. The girl sat across from him, the flames painting her face with light. She pulled the cloth tighter, staring at the fire's dance. Her thoughts heavy, but not as dark as before. She dared to whisper, "You could have left me. Why not?" Elias looked at the fire, his face unreadable because others were blind. He answered. She frowned, confused, blind. She repeated softly. He met her eyes, his voice steady. "They saw nothing in you, but I did." Her breath caught, her body still as stone. She wanted to ask what he saw, but fear locked her tongue. Still, the words echoed in her chest, filling cracks she thought could never mend. That night, as the stars spread across the sky, the girl lay awake. She traced the constellations in silence, their shapes still familiar after so long. Her fingers moved lightly in the air, sketching paths she had once known. A spark glowed faintly inside her, fragile yet alive. She had worth. She had something more than chains. And though fear whispered that it could be taken away, the spark refused to fade. Elias, watching from across the fire, saw the faint light in her eyes. He said nothing, but his gaze softened, for he knew then this girl was not what the market had called her. Not useless, not broken, not trash. She was something more. And though she could not yet see it, he would not let her spark die. The stars shone bright above the desert hills, scattered like endless fire across the black sky. The girl sat close to the dying fire, her eyes lifted upward, her fingers tracing the constellations in silence. Elias sat across from her, sharpening his blade, his calm gaze flicking now and then toward her face. Neither spoke much, yet the silence between them no longer felt heavy. It was a silence that carried something new, something fragile but alive. When dawn broke, they packed their things and set out again. The road was rough, winding through sharp rocks and narrow valleys. The girl walked carefully, her steps still, weak but steadier than before. Every time she stumbled, Elias steadied her, his hands strong but never harsh. For the first time in her life, she began to walk not as a prisoner, but as a traveler. And though fear still lingered in her chest, another feeling slowly grew beside it. Hope. By midday, the land began to change. The rocks opened into wide plains, and on the horizon, a shape rose against the sky. The girl stopped, her breath caught in her throat. It was a ship, resting on the sand like a great beast of metal, its wings spread wide, its hull marked with scars of old battles. She had seen ships before, but always from afar, always as something belonging to others. Now one stood waiting for her, and the thought made her knees tremble. Elias led her closer, his pace steady as ever. The girl clutched the cloth around her shoulders, her eyes wide. "Is it yours?" she whispered. "Yes." Elias answered, his voice calm. She stared at the massive frame of steel and glass, her heart racing. It looked strong, powerful, alive, with promise, and yet her fear whispered louder than her awe. "What if they follow us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They will," Elias said simply, fastening a code into the panel at the base of the ship. The ramp lowered with a hiss of steam. "But they will not catch us." The girl hesitated at the bottom of the ramp, her bare feet rooted to the sand. The ship loomed above her, heavy with mystery. Freedom lay inside, but so did the unknown. She had been trapped for so long that even freedom felt like another kind of cage. Elias turned back, his calm eyes meeting hers. "You are not property anymore," he said, his voice steady as stone. "You walk in because you choose to." Her chest tightened, her throat burning with the weight of his words. Choice. The word felt impossible. She had never chosen anything. Not her cage, not her chains, not even the scraps of food she ate. Now, for the first time, someone gave her that power. She lifted her eyes to the stars, then to him. Her feet trembled, but she took a step forward. Then another. Slowly, she walked up the ramp, crossing the line between the past and what could be. Inside, the ship hummed with quiet life. Lights flickered on, casting a soft glow across the metal walls. The air was cool, filled with the faint scent of oil and steel. The girl's breath caught as she looked around, her eyes wide. Every corner seemed alive with promise, with danger, with freedom. Elias moved toward the cockpit, checking the controls with steady hands. The ship responded, engines growling low like a beast awakening. The girl stepped closer, her voice soft. "Where will we go?" Elias looked at the stars beyond the glass. "Anywhere," he replied. Her heart stumbled. The word too large, too impossible. "Anywhere," she repeated, her voice shaking. He nodded, his expression calm. "The galaxy is wide, and it does not belong to those who put chains on you." The ship shuddered as the engines roared louder. The ground shook beneath them, dust rising in a storm around the hull. The girl clutched the back of the seat, her eyes wide with both fear and wonder. She felt the weight of the world pressing down, and then, suddenly, release. The ship lifted, rising into the sky, climbing through clouds of fire and smoke. The city shrank below them, the market nothing more than a dark stain on the sand. The girl pressed her hand to the glass, her chest trembling. She whispered softly, "I am gone." Elias glanced at her, his voice steady. "No, you are free." The words struck harder than the roar of the engines. Tears filled her eyes, slipping down her cheeks silently. She did not wipe them away. She let them fall. For the first time, they were not tears of pain, but of release. The stars opened before them, endless and vast. The girl stared, her mouth parted in awe. She had dreamed of this once, in broken fragments of memory, but now it was real. The galaxy spread before her like an uncharted map. Her heart raced, and the spark within her grew brighter. Elias adjusted the controls, his voice low. "You are part of my crew now." Her head turned sharply, her eyes wide. "Crew," she whispered. "Yes," he said, his tone steady. "Not a slave, not a burden, a crew." Her chest ached, her hands shaking as she clutched the cloth around her. No one had ever given her such words. Crew, it meant belonging. It meant worth. She lowered her eyes, but a small, trembling smile touched her lips. For the first time, she dared to believe she was more than chains. The ship soared higher, leaving. The world below, the stars stretched wider, brighter, infinite. And though danger waited somewhere in the shadows of space, the girl knew she would not face it alone. The market of chains was behind her. Ahead lay something she could not yet name, but in her heart she carried a spark that whispered she was chosen. A spark that whispered she was free, and the galaxy, wide and endless, waited for her.